Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in patch 905, Assassination has saw quite a refreshing return. While it's hard to still say if the spec is going to become insanely good all of a sudden, 905 definitely brought in quite a few changes for it that could put it on the map in the PvE context. There's a lot of things for us to cover in 905 for Assassination, and I felt like it'll be worth making an updated Assassination Rogue guide because of so many different changes. We got changes to Legendaries, we got changes to the viability of the spec, the smoothness of the rotation, and it looks like you might actually be able to drop that Outlaw Rogue if you guys are tired of RNG and you want to go back to the bleeds and poisons and big finisher damage that this spec used to bring back in BFA. So, let's get into the guide for the updated version of Assassination Rogues in the patch 905. First of all, let's talk about what is new with Assassination. Slice and Dice Rank 2 is gone, which means that you will no longer have that smooth energy regen, but it has been replaced by applying more energy regeneration for your passive Venomous Wounds. This means that your energy regen will still feel somewhat smooth-ish, minus the clunkiness of maintaining Slice and Dice, because Envenom will now refresh your Slice and Dice duration, which is the buff Assassination Rogues had in previous expansions, and it works out so well into this one. No more management of Slice and Dice for the most part, minus a few key situations. Overall, this means a much smoother playstyle, something similar to Battle for Azeroth Assassination of the later time if you played that spec back then, which means a so much more satisfying playstyle, more Envenoms into rotation, which ends up playing more off of your mastery and the goodness that we like, the bleeds as well as the poisons. Outside of Assassination, the Venthyr Covenant got buffed quite a bit in terms of its damage, and the playstyle overall ends up being very synergetic for Assassination, where it's looking like a lot of the rogues are going Venthyr if they are expecting to play Assassination in the future. The Nightfall Covenant in The Sims isn't looking too bad either, and the Necrolord Covenant is also not super far behind, which might actually be one of the stronger covenants in pure AoE Mythic Plus situations. While Kirin isn't the worst covenant, it is one of the lower simmon ones for the spec. However, we are talking about rogues, we're not quite mages, who have to play Nightfall or bust. Rogues can basically play any covenant you want to without too much drawback from it. Stats. Let's talk about stats real quickly. Stats in Shadowlands are a little bit more complex. In the last expansion, I could tell you go haste, go crit, mastery or versatility, but in this expansion, you kind of have to sim your character in order to get yourself best in slot pieces. But this would be a rough priority for you to look out for when it comes to gearing your rogue. Agility is your best stat, so whatever piece of gear you get from dungeons or raids, if it's higher item level than what you're currently wearing, good chance that it's going to be an upgrade for you no matter what. Afterwards, Critical Strike and Haste are pretty close to one another, with Haste being slightly ahead on single target, and Crit being slightly ahead in pure AoE, because Crit means more common point generation for your fan of knives. Mastery and Versatility are not terrible, and they're actually pretty equal to each other, with Mastery being slightly ahead of Versatility in AoE. I really recommend all of you to use Simcraft add-on to sim your character to find out the best pieces in your bags, and for everything else we talk about in this video, from talents, legendaries, conduits, you name it. But I know quite a lot of you guys don't like to play the game simming every little thing, and you would rather just enjoy the game and play it as is. So if you're someone who doesn't really want to go through sims left and right, my best advice would be to use whatever gear has the highest item level in your bags. Trinkets, weapons, whatever it is, just take everything that gives you the most amount of agility. Next, let's talk about the talents. Since this is a guide, let's set you guys up for success. In pure single target, it looks like some of the better talents are going to be for at least single target, blindside. However, you can go for elaborate planning in Mythic Plus situations. In the next row, it seems that Subterfuge ends up being kind of the best of both worlds talent, allowing Garrotes quite a bit of damage and only getting stronger the more enemies are around. At level 30, I prefer Vigor. Technically, you can play Deeper Strat. Technically, you can play Mark for Death in Mythic Pluses, but I think Vigor ends up being a good all-rounder for every situation. At level 35, it's hard to give up Cheat Death. It just ends up being the best safety net a rogue can have in PvE situations when things go haywire. In level 40, it's really up to you, but there is some potential in Mythic Pluses for you to actually have choices between Iron Wire Silence Boost, Internal Bleeding Extra Bleed, or Prey on the Weak Extra Damage Increase for your party. In level 45, Alacrity ends up being kind of the go-to choice for everything. Maybe in the future in potential builds, the other two like Exsanguinate could be more an exciting option. At level 50, it feels like Poison Bomb is a pretty decent one for general use, but better for raids, where Crimson Tempest definitely gets quite a lot of its value in pure AoE. Next, let's talk about Soulbinds. And I am playing as a Venthyr rogue, so I am going to be talking about him mostly from the Venthyr perspective. But also Venthyr does seem like a best sim for Assassination too. So the best Soulbinds for you, depending on your covenant, are going to be to simply sim yourself. You will have to use the Raidbot's website and find what fits you best, whatever covenant you end up playing, and you should sim them in order to figure out your best Soulbinds for single target, as well as your best Soulbinds for AoE. So let's talk about what we can choose with our Soulbinds, is the conduits. Lash and Scars, if you are Venthyr, is extremely strong right now, and if you're playing Venthyr, you should always have Lash and Scars as one of your potency conduits at all times. Well-Placed Steel is a great overall potency conduit that works great in single target or in AoE. Since Assassination has such a high synergy with pure single target with your Vendetta, there's always opportunity for you to shift the enemy and do a bunch of damage to them, whether it's single target or AoE. Lethal Poison ends up being a really good second potency conduit for single target, and also really exceptionally good if you are going to be doing a few target cleave. However, Poison Qatar definitely takes over if you're going for the big AoE situations, like Mythic Pluses where there's constantly spawning adds, and there's a lot of things for you to fan of knives. If you are playing Venthyr like me, our best Soulbind is Nadja, and I would say Nadja is the best choice because of how you can structure her if you want yourself a conduit that works for everything. You have the haste buff, which is great with the start with Nadja, you have extra single target damage with Duelist, and you could put the other potency conduit for AoE in case you want to switch to something like Mythic Pluses. Legendaries. Now we have actually something to talk about here. There's quite a lot of buffs to Legendaries with Assassination, and I predict that there's going to be shifts in the meta, and the meta is going to evolve for this spec. A lot of this video is really early crafted, so it's mostly speculation in terms of what will be best in slot. But I've done my own sims on my rogue that's fairly decently statted, and I've came up with some of the better single target as well as AoE Mythic Plus legendaries that you should consider running in the future. I would say the best overall single target legendary is Doomblade. This one just seems to synergize really well into the playstyle of Assassination, since we get to cast Envenoms a lot more often with the changes in the 901. This one ends up doing quite well in single target and even quite good in cleaves, really taking advantage of the strong single target damage Assassination seems to put out. If you're going to be doing Mythic Pluses, I've done some sims, and for me it showed that Zaldyk Legendary as well as Master Assassin are simming the best. Zaldyk is really good for pure AoE situations, especially when you're going to be playing Crimson Tempest. As you are rotting enemies down, they will take quite a bit of damage from the bleeds. And Zaldyk ends up doing pretty well in single targets, so it ends up doing pretty good for Mythic Pluses, where boss damage as well as add damage is a concern. But Master Assassin seems to have same versatility, as it sims really well for the spec of Assassination. And Assass plays super well into crit, with 100% crit, that's a lot of common points you'll be generating. For my sims, it looks like the Vanish with the Vendetta combo for Master Assassin is quite deadly, but also offers you that flexibility of being able to utilize that crit in order to spread common points very easily on enemies as well. Master Assassin might actually be the go-to in the future sims, as it ends up being probably the best of both worlds in terms of the balance between the potential single target damage you can do as well as AoE. But of course, do some sims for your character and figure out which legendary craft. Doomblade, Zaldyk, and Master Assassin would be some of the first ones I would focus on at the very beginning. For the rotation, I think we should first start with the burst openers, since Assassination is going to have those burst beefy openers. And from openers, we can kind of figure out what the playstyle is going to be like afterwards. From stealth, you'll want to go with the Garrote, into Mutilate, into Slice and Dice, into Mutilate and Rupture. So now you get your Bleed set up and your Slice and Dice, which are the buffs and debuffs you want to maintain. From there, you want to spam Mutilates or use your Covenant abilities to generate common points until you have 4 to 5 common points. This is where you would use Flagellation if you are Venthyr. Drop a Vendetta on the enemy into a Shiv, into a big Envenom, then Mutilate spam until you have almost full common points, and then back to Envenom. From there, you can go for a Vanish into a Re-Garrote, since Subterfuge Garrote should be fallen off by then, and from there we go into our rotation. In single target, you'll be utilizing Mutilates or Ambushes if you get them from Blindside procs, and then trying to build common points to about 4 or 5. The whole time you want to maintain Rupture, Garrote, as well as Envenoms, and Envenoms will help maintain Slice and Dice, so you shouldn't have to worry about it too much. And during your Vendetta windows, you'll want to make sure to maximize as many Envenoms, so prior to Vendetta, want to make sure all your bleeds up and running. Every time you have a Shiv, you kind of want to use as many Envenoms during that window as you can. So pulling some common points to make sure you have Shiv into Envenom, Mutilate spam into Envenom, as many Envenoms as you can fit in there, the better. And that's going to be the basic playstyle of single target, and the priority you will want to watch out for Assassination Rogues. In AoE it's a little different because you will have multiple targets to deal with, but in the opener what I would like to usually do is go for a triple Garrote if you can, or Garrote as many enemies as humanly possible. From there I'll usually follow up with a Crimson Tempest to get my bleeds up and running, Phantom Knights to build common points, and this is the ability you'll be using for instead of Mutilates, and then start putting Ruptures on enemies. You also want to find a window when you want to put up Slice and Dice as well, unless you're hitting like 5 or 8 targets. I think that's the only time Slice and Dice kind of falls off. You also want to make sure to use Vendetta. It is a big cooldown, and while it doesn't really help you with AoE damage to do damage to everybody, the energy regen as well as the damage you can put up to that singular enemy, usually the biggest target in a dungeon group or something, will actually be quite significant. You will want to make sure to shiv that singular target, and if let's say you got a lot of damage going, you'll actually want to switch to Mutilate spams into Envenoms while you have your big burst, while your dots are rotting all the other enemies down. But for the most part, you'll be pressing Phantom Knives in order to build common points, maintain Rupture on at least 3 targets, and make sure to use that Envenom in order to maintain your Slice and Dice from time to time. But if you do have a bunch of bleeds on enemies and you have Vendetta rolling, shiv the biggest target in the group, and actually proceed to Mutilate spam into Envenoms, unless you're hitting like 5 or 8 targets, where Phantom Knights would actually generate you probably more common points. For your consumables, I have a whole list of different consumables that you'll want to run for your rogue. This is just a list of all the things that is recommended in a variety of different guides, and a lot of this stuff I will be running on my rogue as Assassination. I think one of your best secondary stats is going to be haste, so you'll definitely want to put that on rings. Agility on your boots, because again, also a really good stat. I generally run Sinful Revelations and Celestial Enchant on my weapons. However, if you're someone who does only Mythic Pluses, you could run at least one Lightless Force, as it does end up doing quite a bit of AoE damage. I also would go for Agility Food, but if you can't find any Agility Food or if it's too expensive, go with Haste Food on the Auction House. Finally, for your weapons, I would go for at least one Sharpening Stone for one of your daggers, and for the other dagger, I would go with Weapon Oils. If you're going to be using any consumables inside of Mythic Pluses or Raids, Weapon Oil as well as the Sharpening Stone is a decent balanced combination that works for both single target as well as AoE situations. And that's going to be everything I have for you guys for Assassination in patch 905. Overall, the spec didn't really change too much. It plays very similarly to Battle for Azeroth, I'd say, rather than the early version of Shadowlands. The change to Slice and Dice and the Envenom, giving you longer Slice and Dices, feels fantastic, and honestly, it feels so much smoother. With how the sims are looking, it's looking like this could be potentially the best single target spec for anything PvE. And because it does so much more damage in the sims, I don't doubt that it will have some play in Mythic Pluses. With the recent Monk nerfs, it looks like there's now more opportunity for melee to rise up, especially if you can do more damage than a Monk in pure single target. And if you've enjoyed the playstyle of Assassination in previous expansions, I think right now would be a perfect time to get a new rogue up and running, or check out your old rogue if you've abandoned it a while ago. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. As always, I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this from the channel in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in the next one.